My name is Christian. So I grew up in Bakersfield, California, and I'm trying not to say I was born a baby because that's just corny, but it's the only thing that's coming in my mind right now. Bakersfield was great. Hardworking dad. My mom was a homekeeper. She kept the house really clean. My mom's a refugee from northern Algeria, and my dad's a immigrant from Canada. And so I don't know how they met in the desert of Bakersfield. Things were pretty normal for the most part. Back then they had this program called DARE in the elementary schools, DARE Against Drugs. DARE taught you that if you learned anything, if you heard anything about drugs, you were supposed to call the police. And one night I heard my parents arguing about cocaine. And I knew that word, and I said, oh, that's something needs to be done about this. And like a good kid, I followed the directions of my DARE officer, and I placed a call into the sheriff's the next day. And thankfully when they came, they didn't find any dope actually there, but a lot of the paraphernalia was there. And for me, that was kind of, at least in my memory, a breaking of the age of innocence, the veil kind of being pulled away from this facade that I thought was my life. And in some ways, it gave me permission, almost a duty, to go and get high, to go down that same path. And so I began to experiment with drugs and alcohol. And back then, I used to do a thing called tagging. And so that's where you get a spray paint can. You have all these different tips, fat tips, skinny tips, and you go out and you put your name on curbs and on the side of buildings, and it's like a gang thing. So I got into tagging the streets, and running around and just being a little heathen and using drugs and alcohol. And things got really took a turn for the worse and got dark when I was introduced to methamphetamines about the age of 15, 16. And that's when the criminal activity got worse. I wasn't that great of a tagger because when you're paranoid running the streets and you haven't slept for 7 days, you hear things that aren't necessarily coming. And so we didn't tag much when we were doing that because I was so paranoid that someone was coming, or I could see a cop, or, during that time, I started using and selling drugs, and I never saw anybody do one line of meth. Never. Everybody always came back for more. And it was an evil, and still is, just an evil substance. I began to really go to a dark place, and eventually got kicked out of the house right when I graduated, 17 years old, for selling and using drugs. My dad was like, I'm not gonna, he called it tough love, right? It's just love, right? I'm not gonna watch you kill yourself. I'm not going to co-sign it by letting you live in my house. So I left. I moved to Santa Barbara, California, and just started doing different drugs. There were different drugs available then. And then I met this woman. She was 30-something years old. I'm 18. And that's when I got my first tattoo. She bought me my first tattoo. And it was actually the tattooist who did there's a movie called American Me. It's an old gang movie, prison movie. He did all the he did all the makeup tattoos for that whole movie. Yeah, I can't remember his name, Freddie something. So he did the first clown tattoo, which has raised in value over the years, because it was this small, and now as I've gotten bigger, it's like, and so that was the first time I got a tattoo then. And what's interesting is, so living in Santa Barbara, I was trying to do the right thing. Just pulling in my own self-will, just try to do the right thing. And I'd gotten paid, and I remember this very distinctively. I'd gotten paid and I'd had the money, and I thought, I want to get high. And the money was burning a hole in my pocket. And instead, what I decided to do was spend the money on a tattoo. And I got this tattoo across my back done. And it was like, I hadn't really craved meth since. I've gotten a lot more tattoos since. But, it was a shift. And that was kind of the first time I had enforced mind over matter there. It didn't stick, right? I mean, I eventually got high again until I kind of reached what I say is I hit what I say is that I hit an object that was stronger than me, an opposing force that knocked me down. And my dad offered to take me to this thing called Promise Keepers. So it used to be this evangelical thing. It was all men only, and it was in Los Angeles at the LA Coliseum, sold out, all men in there. And I didn't really have a desire to know Jesus. I always knew that there was a God, but God was more of a watcher, He was just watching me, but He wasn't getting involved in anything, Certainly not dying for me, right? And so I'm at this event and everyone starts walking down, which I know now is an altar call. I just had this in me. I gotta go down there, So I got up and I can remember it so vividly. Getting up and walking down those steps into the middle of that Coliseum with I don't know how many other 1,000 guys. And the sky and the color, the blue of that sky, I've only seen a blue like that in Paris, And it was just this amazing spiritual experience where I was touched and I was changed. I met Jesus that night, And so I stopped doing drugs immediately. I'd lost that desire. I got involved in a church called Set Free Ministries. Set Free is a prison ministry, so a lot of guys come to them through prison. But they're very active in outreach and getting in the community. And when I mean community, I mean they go to the hood. And so these are old ex-gang members, these are old ex-criminals, so I mean I was fit right in. I'm small fish compared to, and my first church experience is setting up speakers in the hood and turning rap songs into Christian songs and cooking barbecue for people to come and hang out and meet us and get to know us and meet Jesus. So that was my first church experience. And that's, to me, has always implanted to me that that's what church is. Church is, we used to have homeless guys pull their shopping carts out and park it outside. Then they'd walk in and sit in the back, you know what I mean? It was such an experience, and I was in a deep community there in Bakersfield, really plugged in, and me and my now wife moved to Los Angeles. And in Los Angeles, I got out of that community, And I also, during that time, didn't do any internal soul work, shadow work, the flesh, or whatever word you want to use for it, right? I didn't work that out. I had kind of just took this Jesus thing and ran with it. And so minus community and minus the soul work, I fell back into addiction in Los Angeles. So once in Los Angeles, minus the community and minus the work internally, I got involved in a band and I was working in the entertainment industry and I was thinking I'm living my best life, and I started drinking and I got back into drugs again. Never feeling like ever abandoned by God, There was a point though, once I started back into my addiction, years into it, where I felt like there's a scripture that talks about being handed over to your sin. And there was a point when I went back to drugs and alcohol as a solution for me that I felt like I was handed over at a certain point. Never was the grace of God removed from me. Never did I not feel the sense that, He had left me. I never felt like never had I felt like He left me or forsook me. I knew that wasn't true. But it was like the addiction kick-started into this monster that I couldn't battle alone. And I used to tell people as I was getting high, man, I really should stop getting high. And when you tell other people who are getting high, you should stop getting high, well, it's pretty useless, And so I finally, through a series of events, man, another immovable object that I hit. And I believe that after I first met Jesus and got involved in Set Free had this thing that they did. Every morning you read a psalm and you read a proverb. And so you get to the 30 days, you're reading a psalm or every day, and then you restart the next 30. And so doing that year after year, I believe, put certain guardrails in my heart and imprinted on my being. And when I hit that immovable object and I saw what I was going to have to do to continue to use drugs and to behave in the way I was behaving, I wasn't willing to go there. I was like, nah, I'm not gonna do what it takes to keep this up. And so I confessed, hey, I got this problem. This time to somebody who could actually help. And so the company I was working with, if more companies were like this, man, they kept my job open for me. They paid my salary and they sent me to a rehab. And I went to a place called Penfield Christian Homes. And in Penfield, that's where I learned that, I'm a child of God. And I was trying to live life like I wasn't a child of God. And it taught me to embrace who I am in Christ. But what Penfield also did is they gave me tools. They gave me the 12 steps. They gave me cognitive behavioral therapy and relapse prevention. They gave me these tools that I could use to now implement in my own recovery and in activating and executing my faith in Jesus. And so I got out of there and I was done. I was ready to recover. And that's been my world since. For the last 8 years, my world has been recovery. I've recovered out loud. I talk about it, I share it as often as I can. And I think a lot of that comes back to that first church experience, that we live this, we do this. When we see Jesus says, we do that, because that's what Jesus said to do, Now I have the privilege of running this nonprofit, Most High Ministries, and, AKA the Most High Show, AKA Most High Media, AKA the Most High Bros, we create recovery content. It started out with, I wanted to share faith stories, much like what's happening here. But something led me to doing more recovery-oriented content. And there was a natural pull and a natural motion and energy that kind of came with that focus. And so I've always just felt like, look, the Lord's good at communicating, His voice is never hard to hear. It's us that kind of just got to tune in. And so we started following that lead, and it's just been amazing. It's been powerful. The people I've met doing a little podcast, to hear their stories of recovery and how they've come from such dark, how they've come from dark and just desperate places, and to live meaningful, whole, happy, free lives. It's amazing. Look, there's a couple of tattoos that I like, because, not so much because of the artwork, but because of the story behind it. So there's one I have here which says humility before honor. And I got that tattoo because I was working for a church at the time doing creative services, and I was on my way to tell them how they were doing everything wrong and how they needed to listen to me. And I haven't heard from the voice of God often, right? So I'm not a person who's always, God told me. But that was a time when I heard pretty clearly, and I think to the years of reading Proverbs, I heard that humility before honor. And I thought, oh, I can't tell them nothing, because I gotta be humble. I gotta show humility. And when it's time for me to be lifted up, I'll be lifted up, because the Lord will lift me up. And so I got that, I got this tattoo to signify that, to remind me of this principle in my life. A lot of my character defects center around pride, self-centeredness, and those are things that'll lead me to just be unpleasant, or could lead me back out to drugs and alcohol. Another one I got is this one that says, be still. And I was drawing this when I was in rehab. I kept drawing this tattoo very poorly. It looked like an alien whenever I drew it, but I kept drawing it because the idea to be still, to find peace and serenity in the moment, the present moment. I believe that's where God is, in the present moment. And so be still is to remind me that, to connect with God. Be still, know that I'm God, right? I got this God's child on each hand. I got that before, I got this not soon after meeting Jesus. And I got it because I thought, oh, if I get this, then whenever I put it in my hand, I'll know, and I'll be reminded. And that didn't work. It didn't work. I became completely numb to the fact that it says God's child on my hand, and I overlooked it. I have one that's in my own handwriting. It says, trust God, clean house, and help others. And it's an old recovery AA adage, and it's in that order. You trust God first, then you clean house, then you help others. And there's been times in my life where I skip the cleaning house, and I just go to helping others. And that doesn't work very well. The trust God is there on first because you need that stability and that anchor, you know, to get your life in order, to get the things in order, and then to help other people. I want to say that God is bigger and better than anyone has ever explained to you. And that the best we have to explain God is metaphor, because it can't be explained. And I'm gonna tell you, it's my experience of whatever God is way better than what we think it is.